My drunk uncle proposed to me on my wedding day to try stop me from marrying my fiancée. Turns out he was right about her all along. On my wedding day, while my fiancée and I were exchanging our vows, my extremely drunk uncle stood up and yelled, "I object!" He started stumbling towards me, and given that he had always hated my fiancée, I prepared for a speech about how I shouldn't marry her. Unfortunately, I was wrong. He actually got down on one knee and started declaring his undying love for me. I immediately realized this was an attempt to stop the marriage, so I tried to get him to stand up. However, I was unsuccessful. Eventually, a few people gathered around him, and he had to be picked up by all four limbs and carried out like a human battering ram. The rest of the wedding was strange. My newlywed wife and I tried our best to lift everyone's spirits, but given that they just witnessed that, it's no surprise people went home early. In the weeks and months that followed, my wife Sarah and I tried to move on from the wedding day fiasco, but something felt off. Sarah became increasingly distant. I thought a trip to our favorite golfing spot might help lighten the mood and bring us closer again. Sarah and I used to love spending our weekends there. We were both terrible at mini golf and would often laugh at each other over our terrible swings, but we enjoyed the vibe of the golf spot. I asked her if she wanted to go one Saturday morning while we were having breakfast. She looked up from her phone, looking uninterested, and said that she couldn't go today. When I asked her why not, she said that she had promised one of her girlfriends that she would help her with some errands since she had been so stressed these past couple of weeks. This seemed off, because her friend had just come back from vacation, and she seemed pretty relaxed the last time we saw her. She said it was always something on her plate, which was true. Her friend was a busy woman. Every time we saw her, she was on the go. I asked her if the next day would work then, and she bit her lip, and she said she had a lot of work to catch up on. I let it go, and told her it was all right, and that we'd find another day to go, but I couldn't help but feel like she wasn't telling me everything. As Sarah got up to clear the dishes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. We used to prioritize our time together, especially our weekend outings. Now, it seemed like she always had an excuse to be somewhere else. The excuses were starting to pile up. Was she hiding something from me? At first, I thought it was just stress from adjusting to married life, but more signs started to appear. A few nights later, Sarah and I were sitting in the living room halfway watching a movie together. I was watching the movie while she was scrolling on her phone. Suddenly, she burst out laughing at something on her screen. I asked her what was funny, and she quickly said it was nothing. I looked at her as she kept smiling at her phone. She looked up at me and told me it was just a stupid meme. I asked her to see it, and she said I wouldn't get it. She then said she was getting tired and that she was going to head to bed soon. I told her good night, and she went upstairs. Later that night, after Sarah had fallen asleep, I couldn't get her actions out of my mind. Something felt off. I got up and went to her phone, which she had left charging on the nightstand. I knew it was overstepping a boundary, but I just had to know what was going on. I unlocked her phone and went to her messages. My heart sank when I saw several conversations with unsaved numbers. One, in particular, caught my eye. It was a string of messages from someone whose number I didn't recognize. Their conversations were mainly memes and funny videos they shared with one another, until I scrolled a little bit further up. The guy asked Sarah how her day was. She said it was long and boring and wished she could have spent it with someone fun instead. He then replied, "Maybe the next time I see you we can skip the boring parts and go straight to the fun." There was no outright talk of cheating, but the subtle flirting and how friendly they were enough to show that something had gone on between them. The laughs from earlier and the casual intimacy in their words all pointed to a connection she was keeping from me. I felt angry, hurt, and confused. Who was this person, and why was Sarah hiding this relationship from me? The doubts and suspicions that I tried to deny had come true. I put her phone back and laid down next to her, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing with questions and the realization that my marriage was failing before it had a chance to begin. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, so I decided not to speak on it at the moment until I had solid proof against her to confront her. In the following weeks, I started collecting evidence. I took screenshots of her text messages, spoke with some of our shared friends, and pieced together the timeline of their affair. It was a painful process, but I needed to know the full story before confronting Sarah. I found myself questioning everything. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, replaying every moment, every conversation, wondering how I could have missed the signs. One night, I decided to dig deeper. I went through old messages, social media posts, and even emails. I discovered a pattern. Sarah had been very secretive over the past year, with late-night messages, sudden trips for work, and constant texting with the unnamed number. Each piece of evidence felt like another stab in the back. I reached out to mutual friends to ask them for information, without revealing too much. One friend, Karen, mentioned seeing Sarah with a guy she didn't recognize at a cafe a few times. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. She assumed it was a colleague, but now, it all made sense. I decided to make one last effort to reconnect with Sarah. Maybe a nice dinner out would give us a chance to talk and bridge the growing distance between us. I had to try one last time. I saw she was getting ready to go out, so I called her downstairs. I asked her if she wanted to try this new Italian place downtown for dinner that night. Sarah has always loved pasta, and I've heard great things about this restaurant. She barely looked up from her phone and said she'd love to, but she had to take care of some stuff. It was 9 p.m. and she was wearing a beautiful black dress with heels. I asked her what could she possibly have to do dressed like like that at this hour? She said it was just a girls' night that she forgot to tell me about. I told her that I knew she was cheating on me. She froze. Her eyes widened, and she asked me what I was talking about. I showed her all the evidence from the past few weeks, the screenshots, and the credit card transactions that showed she didn't match where she said she was going to be. She got defensive, saying that I didn't trust her, and that I knew she wouldn't do anything like that before. She claimed that someone framed her, and those messages weren't her. After I told her that I knew this was her because I found the messages as she was asleep, she said it was not what I thought it was. She said it was just harmless fun, and she didn't do anything with the people she chatted with. She'd been lying to me, avoiding me, and making up excuses to spend time with these people. This was cheating in my eyes. She then tried to make excuses like she was lonely and I was always busy at work. I tried to make plans with her countless times, but I wasn't hearing it. I told her that she had made her choice and that she should stick with it. I told her our friends even said that she was cheating on me. She asked me which friends, and I told her I wasn't going to say. She then asked if my uncle had revealed all this to me and told me to check her phone. I asked her why my uncle would say anything about this. I was genuinely confused at this point. I asked her what he had to do with this, and she hesitated. I knew something was up now, and I knew I needed to talk to my uncle to get to the bottom of this. She broke down in tears, begging me to stay with her. I told her I needed space and left the house. I needed answers, so I reached out to my uncle. We met at a quiet cafe the next day, and he looked worn out. I asked him about what Sarah had told me. He immediately told me he was sorry, and that he should have told me earlier. He knew Sarah was cheating on me before the marriage, and that was the reason he was trying to interrupt it before I said, I do. I asked him why he would let me follow through with this decision if he knew she was cheating on me before our marriage, and he said that it was complicated. She had been blackmailing him this whole time and threatened him if he told me. I asked what she could possibly be hanging over my uncle's head to make him not tell me the truth. He hesitated and admitted that his girlfriend, Beth, was transgender. She said she would tell the family that Beth was trans if he exposed her infidelity. I was in shock. Not only had my wife cheated on me, but my own uncle had kept it a secret because he was being blackmailed. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. Our family was quite conservative, and I knew they would basically disown Uncle if they knew the truth about Beth, but I still felt betrayed by both of them. I could see how genuine he was and realized that he had been just as much of a victim of Sarah's manipulation as I was. It didn't erase the pain, but it helped me understand the impossible situation he had been in. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing. Filing for divorce was a difficult decision, but it was the only way to move forward, and I finally decided it was time to take the next step. I met with a lawyer, prepared the divorce papers, and got myself ready for what was to come. One evening, after Sarah had come home from work, I asked her to sit down. She must have sensed something was wrong because she looked nervous. I told her that I couldn't do this anymore and served her the papers. Her face went pale as she stared at the documents in my hand. She begged me to work through this with her. She promised me she cut off all contact with them. I shook my head and told her that it's not just about the affair partners. It was about the lies and the manipulation. She blackmailed my uncle and used his relationship against him to cover up her own wrongdoings. She sobbed and tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. She said she was scared that I would leave her. She begged me not to leave her and said she didn't know what she'd do without me. She said she loved me. I felt a ton of emotions all at once. I wanted to be with her because I loved her, but I knew our marriage was too far gone, and my trust in her could never be restored. I left her sitting there, broken and crying, the divorce papers on the table in front of her. As I walked out of the house, I felt a weight being lifted off of me, even though I was sad to leave her. My uncle and I continued to rebuild our relationship. It was a slow process, but I could tell he was genuinely remorseful, and I could see how much the situation had affected him and Beth. As the months went by, I began to see the situation from a new perspective. I started therapy, which helped me process my emotions and understand my feelings. Therapy also helped me rebuild my self-esteem. I had been feeling worthless and unlovable, but my therapist helped me see my worth and the positive qualities I brought to a relationship. Slowly, I started to believe in myself again. One of the biggest changes during this period was reconnecting with my passions. I had always loved painting, but during my marriage, I had let it fall by the wayside. Now, with more time on my hands, I picked up the brush again. It was therapeutic. I also started running, which I had never been particularly interested in before. A few years later, I felt ready to dip my toes back into the dating pool. It was intimidating at first, but my friends encouraged me to take it slow and have fun. I went on a few dates, nothing serious, but it was nice to feel desired and appreciated again. One date stood out from the rest. Her name was Courtney, and she was everything Sarah wasn't. She was kind, genuine, and understanding. We clicked immediately, and our first date turned into a long conversation over coffee and then dinner. We shared our past experiences, and she listened without judgment. As we continued to see each other, Emily showed me what a healthy, supportive relationship looked like. She encouraged my passions, supported my decisions, and most importantly, she was honest.